And hello, Hearts of Oak. Thank you so much for joining us once again. It's great to have a brand new guest stateside. We're going to learn all about blockchain, crypto, a whole other sector. And we've had a number of guests talking about this, but it's wonderful to have Bryan Ferre with us. Bryan, thanks so much for giving us your time today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited about this.
Great to have you. And I've delved into the background in your world. Obviously, brandferry.com is the website. People can go there and look at the many articles you've written, your background. And we'll see where this conversation goes because I've often talked to people in terms of crypto, in terms of investing, and that's the financial side. But there's a whole other side that is developed, which maybe wasn't originally part of the thinking back whenever Bitcoin first surfaced, and that's actually security and building a whole infrastructure on the blockchain, which is completely separate. But Brand, if I could ask you a little bit about your background before we jump into this, and I've looked into your background and I can't even try and sum it up. So I will throw the ball to you and then we'll pick up on some of these issues.
Yes. Yeah, I've had kind of an interesting journey through my career. I started out in I was actually a classically trained graphic designer, and did graphic design work for about the first 5 years of my career. And in 1995, I kind of BS'd my way into designing a website. Uh, and at the time, I'd only been on the internet twice. And uh, it's kind of a funny story. I'll share it with you someday. But I, so that kind of transitioned my career over to the tech side. And in 2000, actually 1999, I was working on a project. I'll share the idea and you tell me if you think it was a good one, because our client thought it was the dumbest thing they'd ever heard of. So back in those days, there was no such thing as digital cameras and smartphones. And so if you wanted to, quote, digitize your photos, you had to scan them. And so we built this website. It was called gatherround.com. And what it did is it went through your network and it found your scanner, and you would scan your photos, photos of little Johnny playing baseball and your daughter dancing in a contest or whatever. And it would post these photos onto a web page, and then you could invite your friends and family to gather round. And then your friends could post a little thing, oh, that's a great picture of Johnny, and then you could share that with everyone. And our client at the time, their CEO said, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. No one will ever put pictures of their kids on the internet. We like to say we created the first Instagram, but they didn't like it. And so several years later, of course, MySpace came out and Friendster and Facebook. And in 2002, I was speaking at a tech conference, and I talked about the dangers of big tech scraping behavioral data. And I was pretty much laughed off the stage, right? Everyone was like, all these tech guys were like, no one's ever going to do that. That's not a worry. And then of course Google came out, and Google became sort of the centerpiece of the internet at the time. It was sort of this time where America Online was kind of going away, and people could just browse the internet. And I found it interesting when Google came out, they had a corporate motto, and their corporate motto was never do anything evil. And what is interesting, as we have watched as Web 2 kind of evolved, is that's precisely what they do. And so in 2015, I was introduced to blockchain tech. That was my first introduction to it, and I had just gone through a rather traumatic experience in my life. My wife passed away at the age of 44, and it turned out that it was a medical error. Uh, Basically, she was seeing two different doctors, and they weren't sharing data, They gave her a combination of medicines that took her life. And not long after that, I was introduced to blockchain, and I realized when I first saw blockchain, uh, that this could solve those types of problems, and it could solve the big tech data problem and centralization and all of this. And so I became quite passionate about blockchain. And at the time, I wasn't even interested in the crypto side. In fact, I didn't really even understand it. It was
What
I
year was
turned
this?
2015,
Okay.
and I actually turned down 500 Bitcoin to design a logo. Like I didn't get it right.
We all make
But
mistakes.
yeah, as we went into 18, 19, 20, uh, some really, really weird stuff was happening, and I started writing about it on a fairly regular basis. Cancel culture, this whole woke movement, and these tech companies were silencing people and shadow banning them, and the whole concept of freedom of speech was being just, annihilated. And so in 2020, uh, there was a platform, a social media platform that had just grown tremendously fast. It was the fastest growing app in the App Store and the most downloaded app in the App Store, called Parler. And Parler was, Donald Trump was canceled from all the other platforms, and he landed into Parler, and so it gave him his voice back. And when it was canceled, I remember I was talking to a couple of my friends, and I said, this idea that big tech can just shut down, platforms like this, that's a very scary thing. And so in 2021, I got together with several of my now partners, and we decided, we're going to take this world on. But in order to do it, we got to do it in a decentralized way. We got to do it on the blockchain, and we've got to own all of the infrastructure, because if we don't own it, we'll just get shut down, right? And so we
Which happened
started
to
that.
Porter back in the day under AWB.
Yeah, exactly. So we did it, and we built this blockchain, and we basically give the users back their ability to not only say what they want, but engage in any way that they want. And we use blockchain to reward them for doing that. And one of the things that I think is starting to emerge in blockchain, I always tell this story. I've told this story for years, that a good farmer, somebody who's going to grow a crop, a good farmer knows that you have to prepare the soil. And usually that's done with manure, right? You blend in manure so that you get all these nutrients into the soil. And so basically, every great crop is the result of a pile of shit. And that's what crypto was for 10 years. It was just a bunch of tech nerds creating currencies and hoping that somebody would buy them. And it was the same way in the early days of the internet. You had all these people trying to figure out, what do we do with this tool? And so, but in the last 5 years, what's happened in the world of crypto is there's kind of this new emphasis on what are we creating and why are we creating it. And because of that, you're starting to see more purpose-driven projects that are actually trying to solve real problems, right? XRP, which has kind of become the darling child of blockchain. XRP was designed with purpose, and that purpose was to solve problems for international banks, which is great. Except I personally didn't go to bed last night thinking, "Gosh, I hope they solve the international banking crisis." Right? But we do go to bed worried about things like our medical records and our health records, and we also worry about the availability and the reliability on research and science and advancements in medicine. And we also worry about, our families and what's going on in our schools. And I see blockchain as a way to correct a lot of these problems. And the reason I say that, we talk about education. And I don't know what it's like over there in Great Britain, but our education system here in the States is a joke. And part of the problem, I think, and I'll just give you an example, in the States, higher education, if you're a professor, your incentive as a professor is to become published. Do research and become published. That's how you grow up in your career. That's how you become tenured, right? Has nothing to do with educating students. There's no incentive on educating students and improving student outcomes, learning outcomes. And so if we take the idea of blockchain and we apply it to that one problem, if we could incentivize, create a new economy around actual student outcomes and incentivize students to learn better and learn more and incentivize teachers to teach better and teach more, then you can actually start to make a difference in education. And you can use that same model to solve pretty much all the problems that we see, which we know across the board there are problems. And so that's probably a little more than you wanted to know, but that's how I got to where I am today. And I became really, really personally passionate about this notion of there's really two pieces. The idea that companies like Facebook and TikTok and all these companies, the idea that they extract value out of my attention is a big problem. And the second problem that I believe we're on a mission to solve is global poverty. If you look at the majority of our planet, these people, because their economies aren't responsive and reactive, and they don't have a lot of innovation, they don't have a lot of investment. A lot of people, go through life not making very much money, and yet they pay attention. Isn't it interesting that when we talk about our attention, we use financial terms? I pay attention, I spend time, it's interesting. And the reason is because that's the most valuable thing on planet Earth is our attention. If none of us were here, oil would just be another type of mud, right? It's what we value that creates value. So, interestingly, when we relaunched Parler and we started getting the word out that you own your data on this platform, you own your content, and you own your attention and your behavioral data. And if you want to monetize that, you can. You can earn to engage. And currently, right now, we have a group of users. Some of them are in Pakistan, some of them are in India, and they're earning anywhere from 12 to or $7 to $12 a day just by interacting on the platform. Now, you and I might think, well, that's a cup of coffee. Well, guess what? That that's what they earn every month. So they're literally 30xing what they earn every month, and just by extracting value from their attention. And so that's where I think blockchain and crypto and this idea of sovereign wealth, right? The ability for me to own my stuff that's where I think blockchain and crypto are really headed. The idea that, fart coin and all these other like meme coins, that's just this stuff's just going to go away, just like pets.com went away in the dot-com bubble. It's you have to be solving real problems and problems that affect everyone.
Well, let me ask, because you look at the meme coin or shit coin or however you want, and a money making scheme. You look at the crazy amounts of money, and for someone to make money means many other people get screwed over. Basically, when you look at rug pools and how they work, but that's separate to Optio, one of the many tokens, one of the many coins available. And then the whole issue of decentralization, which huge concern of our information, our data, mistrust of governments, holding that centrally. And the whole crypto sphere takes that to actually, this is not a centrally controlled. This is actually across the board, and you've got that decentralization. I mean, speak into that, because I think that is really important to any of the viewers who are concerned at the control the governments have and why crypto offers something which is very different.
Yeah. So let's talk about first just the idea of centralized control. Um, I have mentioned a couple of times in our conversation that companies like Facebook and Google and TikTok, they do these things that are somewhat nefarious. I've said this many times. The average American reads in a year about 15,000 words. The Facebook user agreement is 14,000 words. So we know they didn't read it, right? Now, the idea that they are doing something nefarious and doing something wrong is actually false. Mark Zuckerberg is the head of a publicly traded company. He has a legal fiduciary responsibility to make as much money as he can for his shareholders. And so the idea of centralized control is what fuels all of these problems that we have. The governments of the world and this idea of centralized control. Now, sometimes when I start talking about decentralization, I think people think that I'm saying, well, we shouldn't have any central control of anything, and I don't. That's not true because but what the government should be doing is uniting the people, not dividing the people. And so the idea that a central authority could unite us, I think is where that's where we should be going. Now, I'll also say this about the financial markets, right? Like how money gets distributed and how it gets used. Uh, Primarily, most of the coins, the crypto coins that you see, are you can't use them for anything. The only thing you can do is sell them for fiat. And that's one of the things that we're focused on is creating utility for these tokens so that you can extract value and get value by using them. And I think that's what you'll see happen over the next couple of years. I did want to mention there is this, I talked about it briefly, but there is this idea that crypto gives us a new way to add value to existing things, right? So the idea that your behavioral data, your choices, your preferences, your fears, the things you believe has value. Well, crypto allows us to create an economy around that. And we just announced a couple of days ago a partnership that we are very, very excited about with a group called Holy Deeds. Holy Deeds is working directly with the Vatican to create and extract value out of sacred relics, out of spiritual art. And we're looking at this not as a way to make money. In fact, most of the money that is going to swirl around all of this is going to go to help people, right? It's not about making anyone a gajillionaire, right? But I want you to think about this for a second. Over the last 20 years, just in our lifetime, we have seen a shift in our society away from the values that we have held for 2,000 years. And it's not, I don't think it's because people don't believe anymore. It's that the over institutionalization of everything, like, and I'm talking government, I'm talking schools, I'm talking everything, that has led the next generations to mistrust faith and mistrust our values. And I'm cautious when I talk about this because I, for one, and this is maybe not a popular belief, but I, for one, believe that we as a people, and I'm talking about everyone on planet Earth, we as a people are held together by our faith. And in fact, I wrote a whole book about what faith really is, because most people believe that faith means I believe in something that I can't see. Well, the reality, in my view, the reality is faith is the energy that makes all things possible. And what we've been told over the last 20 years is that all things are not possible. And it's created this, I'm going to call it schism. And we look around the world and you see all these religious wars and religious back and forths and all of this stuff. That does not represent the people. That represents a few people, right? And so we're really excited about this relationship, because I think part of everyone's mission should not only be to free the minds and free the voices of the people, but we also should be encouraging us to come back together in faith surrounding values, right? And so I don't know how I got off on that segue, but the idea that if you think about economies in general, most economies are measured. In fact, the indicators that we look out to determine whether an economy is healthy or not is productivity and production, right? And that that has fueled capitalism and capital markets around the world for many, many decades, since the turn of the century, right? But if we can now find ways to create new economies that have never existed before. I have a friend that's working on a project, a blockchain project, to incentivize industrial mining companies to make good decisions and do what's good for the planet and do what's good for the people. All of these types of projects are what is really going to happen in crypto, because it gives us the ability to unlock value that we've never been able to do before.
Tell me, tell us a little bit about how you came to Optio as one of 10,000 maybe cryptocurrencies available. Many
There's more than a million.
are there.
Yeah,
I just look on coin market cap and I just
yeah,
make that
yeah.
say, but there are lots created. You look at some of the sites and ones are created and then they're rug pulled and they disappear. No function at all except to make a very small amount of people rich, or not so rich. But where does Optio fit into that? You've talked about the connection with Holy Deed, which is really interesting because this is real world connections as opposed to just something in the crypto space that actually makes you money and then disappears. And this real world problem you're talking about, really interesting. But where does Optio fit in that? How did your journey lead you to starting this?
Yeah. So again, it all starts with the utility of the token. What can I do with it, right? We are working right now on launching a marketplace similar to Amazon stores, where merchants can connect their stores to this marketplace. And by enrolling into this marketplace, they can now accept multiple forms of currency to sell their products. So I'll give you an example. I have a line of clothing that I designed. It's a crazy line of golf shirts, right? I harken back to my days as a graphic designer. I got to have a creative outlet, right? So when I put my clothes, when I put my products up online, I almost always say, you can buy this shirt today for 20% off, right? That's one of the ways that we motivate people to buy things, is we discount them. Well, on in our marketplace, I can say you can pay 80% in fiat, in dollars or pounds or whatever, euro, uh, and 20% in the OPT token. So I, as a merchant, am not losing anything because I was already going to give you 20% off, right? And you, as a user, you get this great discount because you actually earned the token by using the platform. You didn't buy the token, you earned it, right? Now, I've never seen that done. And right now, there's a lot of buzz around crypto right now because the world kind of changed over the last 4 months, right? And this is going to give a way for merchants to easily on-ramp their products and start accepting crypto. Now, that to me is going to be one of the most important things that happens in the crypto world, is that people will be able to use it, not just sell it, right? You're talking about rug pulls and all these different things. I think most of that has been weeded out, right? There's anywhere from 10,000 to 50,000 tokens that are minted every day, new ones, right? But they don't really work anymore. Like the idea of, I'm just going to buy this coin and it's going to scale up and then I'm going to make a bunch of money. Like people have kind of learned that that isn't how it works. Um, and I'll also tell you this is just another side note, but I've been in the crypto space now since 2015. I've never bought any crypto. Not one time. I've never bought a token. All of my crypto assets and wealth, if you will, has come from running nodes. Like I earn the tokens that I get. And that is also where everything is going, right? This idea that I'm going to, just mint a magic token and make money, I think is a dying thing.
Tell me about one of the issues that people have whenever they look at crypto, a new form of finance, is um, around the huge issue in the UK: surveillance, financial surveillance, and every other area of surveillance, which is full control of our lives. And that goes into the whole area of censorship. Maybe touch on how Optio addresses some of those challenges, because it's all about giving individuals control of not only their data, but actually the finance side of it, and taking back that from this huge government overreach. So, yeah, how does Optio fit into that?
Yeah, so Optio is a layer one blockchain. So it's native transactions on the blockchain, and those are all fancy words that most people won't even understand. But I'll give you an anecdote. When you go to the bank and you deposit £1,000, or do you guys use pounds or euros over there? I don't
We
even know.
still use pounds. We've held against the euro, but the pound doesn't mean anything. So, yes.
Got it. So you go to the bank, you put in £1,000, and they enter that into a ledger, and they mark it as a debit, right? And then I go into your bank the next day, and I want to get a loan. So they loan me your $1,000. Now I have it, and I take it to my bank, and they put it on their ledger as a debit. Now, what's interesting is your bank put the loan that I got on their ledger as a debit, not as a credit. So now they have $2,000 on their balance sheet, but they only actually got 1,000, right? Now, I can get into fractional reserve banking and it makes it even more confusing, but they can loan your $1,000 to 10 people, right? Now I put mine in my bank, and then they loan that to somebody else and they put that in their bank. And all of a sudden you've got this massive amount of money that's just made up. It's not real, right? Now that's a problem with the central banking system, and I can literally go down a rabbit hole on that, and I won't. But
That'll be part two.
yeah, blockchain is different, right? There is no custody, nobody is in custody of your funds. So, and this is true of all blockchains, but we have a partner that has integrated our token. It's called Kyvo Wallet, Kyvo. When you hold assets in that wallet, you are known as an address. Nobody knows that it's your wallet. You're just an address on the blockchain. Now, what's interesting, and this is confusing for some, so I'll try to make it as simple as possible. If I send you OPT tokens, I send it from me to you. That transaction is 100% transparent. You can go to the blockchain website and you can see that I did it. But all you can see is that it's my address sent to your address, right? Now, that level of transparency could be incredibly valuable for things like governments that are spending, billions and billions and billions of our dollars, our tax dollars. If they were doing it on the blockchain, we would know where every cent was going, right? That would be kind of cool. And I think that would take down a notch of fraud and abuse too, right? Um, but what's really cool about the idea of decentralized finance, meaning I can move money around the world. I can literally move it to anywhere in the world. If you wanted to send me money from the UK to the States, you'd have to go to the bank. The bank would take control of the money. They would send it to my bank. They have control of the money, and then I could get it out. With crypto payments, there's no intermediary, right? I don't have to get permission from anyone to send funds and to move funds around. So the idea of decentralized finance really truly empowers people uh, with their own net worth, their own assets, right? And the Optio blockchain is no different. That's how all funds are transferred, is peer to peer, which is amazing.
Tell me about how people can get involved, because there are a lot of areas around this that people need to understand. But how can everyday people get involved? You mentioned running a node. You can join communities, you earn tokens. There are lots of areas on this that people can jump into and getting involved with. So, what does that mean for the viewers watching this, thinking, Optio sounds interesting. What would be the next step for me?
Yeah, so there are really three different ways that you can be involved and become a part of the community. One thing that I'll point out is Optio is not a company. It's literally a community of people just like you and me that run and operate nodes. And when there's a big change that needs to come, there is a vote. It's complete democracy, right? It goes out to the node owners, and the node owners vote on changes to governance, changes to whatever. So that's important to understand. And so the way that you become a part of that community is you purchase a node and run it. Nodes are $1,000, so anybody can attain a node. Now, that's the first way. The second way is you can download Parler and start to engage on Parler and earn rewards that way. You'll get rewards every day into your wallet just for your engagement on the platform. Play TV, which is a YouTube alternative, also allows you to earn. Now, one thing that I'll say, and it's really, really important to understand, is the way the nodes work, right? And why do we even need the nodes? So if you think back to the days when we just started getting cell phones, and you'd be driving along, and all of a sudden you'd have to say, "I'm going to go into the dead zone. I'll call you back when I get into coverage again." The phone companies had to fill in the network. They had to build towers everywhere in order to fill in those holes, and it would have been very, very expensive to do that. So what they did is they went to farmers and building owners and landowners, and they sold them towers. If I owned a farm out in the middle of nowhere and they needed to fill a spot, I would buy the tower, and then the network would lease it back from me for the rest of my life. That's how nodes work. When you buy a node, you're providing resources to the blockchain: computing power, electricity, storage, And those resources are used by the blockchain to process transactions, to process interactions, to measure your impact in the platform by tracking and all of your behavior, right? And so uh, that's how we build it out, is we make it possible for anyone to own a node, and they operate that node, and that node earns rewards every day for the rest of your life.
Tell me, you've got an event coming up because I think often the crypto industry can be an arbitrary thing that actually you've got communities there, and I've been in a number of those communities online, but actually you all also hold events in the outside world, in the real world where people can connect face to face. I think that's vital. I've seen a couple of the crypto and Bitcoin conferences, and I think they're very valuable for like-minded people coming together and discussing some of these concepts. But you've got an event coming up in London. Tell us about that and other events that you've had. We'll put all the links in the description so people can click, and they can be a part of that if they are in this. I was going to call it beautiful city of London. Well, when the sun's shining, it's maybe more beautiful. But tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm going on tour, so to speak. In the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be in London on June 2nd. And anyone in the London area that wants to attend this event, you're invited. I'm going to be talking a lot about some of the things that we've talked about here, but I'm going to be presenting some strategies and ideas around crypto, and really just getting people to understand what's happening and where this technology is going. That event will be held the evening of June 2nd. And in order to attend, all we ask is that you send an RSVP email to my email, and you'll receive back from us the location and time. And we're still settling in on the location, but we're also doing an event on June 6th in Amsterdam. And then I'll be traveling to Paris to present at a very small conference, and then back to the States.
So we
We're
will.
also we're also doing a conference, a crypto conference on a cruise ship in the Bahamas in November of this year. I'll make sure you have the links for that if you want to attend. I like to have fun, and conferences are mostly boring. So we decided to do this conference on a cruise ship in the Bahamas.
And I saw my good friend Robert Malone, who I saw the other week, who's a regular guest on with us. I know he's one
Yes.
of those speakers at that. I will put all those links in the description, not only the June the 2nd, I think is a Monday, in the evening in London. We'll put that in the links in the description and the cruise as well. So I will certainly be there in London. Who knows on the cruise? But I'll certainly be there in London because it'll be around the corner. But how do you, because there's a um again, we talked about people getting involved. There was actually one thing you put out on, I think it was a Facebook post that intrigued me, and you've touched on a little bit, but I'll give it to you and get your thoughts. And this is in terms of faith, which you mentioned. And you'd posted miracles don't just happen; they're made not by luck, but by chance. But by the sacred union of faith and action. Faith sees the invisible, the infinite. Action makes the visible, the definite. Um, and I read that and thought that is intriguing. And you sit back and when you read something and it makes you think of what that means, and also takes you away from the busyness, and makes you think of the importance of understanding, of actually having vision of where faith fits in. But it's an interesting thing to finish off on that. Miracles are the result of the imperfect union of faith and action. Um, Tell us a little bit about that to finish, because that connects with where people are, I think, emotionally, where they connect, and it makes this not just an arbitrary issue, but actually connects with people in their real lives.
Yeah. Uh, uh, so I
Yeah,
have
where do you want to go with that?
Well,
I know.
I have spent, my entire adult life trying to explore the and identify how human beings actually create, and how we most people create chaos in their life, and they create difficulty in their life. And what they don't realize, most people don't realize, is your current circumstances that you're in, whatever those are, what is of your own creation. You created it. And when I talk about the imperfect union of faith and action, faith, as I said earlier, faith is an energy, and that energy is created within us. It's our uh, it doesn't have that much to do with believing. It has more to do with this creative energy that we all have. It is, for me, it is the gift of God. It's the part of us that is divine. And when we look at our actions, most people, like, if we wake up in the morning and you don't like what's going on in your life, you don't have enough money, you don't have a great job, you don't have a great relationship, whatever it is, you can trace that back to little decisions that we make along the way. The word decision is a word that I don't think we understand completely. To decide means to cut off. So when you make a decision, in the universe, there are infinite possibilities. Everything is possible. When you make a decision, you are cutting off every other possibility. That's what it means to decide. So when we look at our circumstances, we look at I call them our outcomes, our outcomes. When we look at our outcomes, most of us want to believe that that just happened to us, that somehow the world just, and reality just happens. In fact, we say things like shit happens, right? Like, and what we need to realize is that action is, it, always 100% of the time, your action is what produces the outcome, right? I have this call it a speech that I give, where I talk about this model that I was taught this model by a good friend of mine. It's called the STEER model, STEAR. S is your situation. So whatever situation you're in, that situation produces a thought. That's the T. That thought produces an emotional response. That's the E. The emotional response triggers an action that you take, and that action gets you the result, right? Now, most of us, because of our training, because of our education, because of culture, society, whatever, we think if we want to change the outcome that we're getting, we have to change the situation, which is why we have very high divorce rates. It's why I have people that are quitting their job all the time. And because you look at the outcome, the result that you're getting, that's the R, the result. If you look at the result that you're getting, you think, I need to change the situation. But the reality is, situations are situations. What you have to change is the thought. How do I think about this situation? What is the thought that triggers this, right? And then we got to avoid this idea that we can't change the thought, because the thought is just what you think. So you can easily change the thought. So it's kind of funny that you pegged on that post, because at the end of the day, everything that I work on, everything that I spend my time on, is changing the way I think, and helping others to change the way they think. Because most of us feel like we can't make a change. We can't make change in the world and in the government and in society. But that's why we're not, because we're not. Think about the elections, right? When we elect a new president or a new prime minister, or whoever, right? When we elect them, what we're trying to do is fix the result that we're getting by changing the situation. But the reality is, if we change the way we think about the situation, then we can make a positive impact. And for me, I'm old enough now that this is it. This is gonna be my legacy, right? This is the last project I'm ever gonna work on. So to me, it's more important to help people change the result that they're getting by changing the way they think. So that's what that Facebook post was about.
Brian, I'm looking forward to meeting you on on the second in just a few weeks. Fascinating conversation, so many areas, not just on Optio and what that gives, not only on Parlor and that social media side, but delving into some of the other concepts as well. So really thrilled that you could join us. Thank you so much for giving us your time. And all the links will be in the description for the viewers and the listeners down there, whether you want to, whether you're in London on the 2nd of June. Do click that, be a part of that. Whether you want to go on a cruise, we'll put that link, or whether you just want to jump in and understand the world of Optio and how you can get involved, all those will be there. But Brian, thank you so much for giving us your time today.
Awesome. Very nice to be here. Thank you.